Okay, so it looks like so far the majority of people have not been involved in EU funded projects yet. So hopefully this training will encourage you to dip your toes in. And just go ahead and end the poll. So yeah, we've got 76% of people not yet involved in EU funded projects. About 18% have been involved in a project or two, and 6% been involved in many projects. Okay.
Okay, brilliant.
So over to you, Emma.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you very much to everybody that is here this morning. So just to introduce myself, my name is Emma Murtagh. I'm the European Programmes Manager here at the Wheel. And I oversee all aspects of EU programmes, including our EU policy work and the European development of the Wheel itself. But importantly, our supports as well for the sector around accessing and managing EU funding. And that's mainly through our programme Access Europe, which we shared a short video about there, and you can learn more about at accesseurope.ie. So we're just going to have a quick look at what we're going to cover this morning. Now, just to warn you, we did do a very similar training to this last year. So just be aware that a lot of the materials that are going to be covered this morning were included in that last training. There are a few additions and updates, but it won't be entirely new content, just to warn you about that. But today we're going to cover how does EU funding work. So this is just a very general overview of how it all works. You don't need to have a lot of information about where EU funding comes from or how the budgets work or anything like that, but it's useful to have kind of an overview of it. We're also going to look at the new funding programs. When we say new funding programs, these are the ones that were released in 2021, and we're going to look at what's new, what are the priorities, and what updates have happened in the last from the previous budget period, which ended in 2020. And then we'll have a look at pathways. So this is how, if you're new to EU funding, which I think about 75% of you are, how you can start your EU funding journey, but then also for those of you who are a little bit more experienced, how you might scale up or kind of refocus your EU funding strategy. Then we're going to have a look at the supports that are available, which is mainly the various national contact points, but also us then at Access Europe. And just to note, even though we've only got a few agenda items there is a lot of information in this session. So what we're going to try and do to make it as kind of user-friendly as possible is to take multiple short breaks. We're going to take little 5-minute breaks throughout this morning's session, just to give your eyes and your brain a bit of a break and give you a chance to get up and move a little bit, because as I said, it's a good bit of information to try and absorb on a Wednesday morning. So we'll try and make it as easy and as friendly for you as possible. And then one more note, it's going to be difficult. How many people do we have now? We have 98 people here this morning, and I'm sure there'll be a few more that will join us. So it is difficult to facilitate a Q&A for this number of people, and particularly when it comes to EU funding, because it's quite a broad topic, and it can get very detailed. Details of individual programs can get very niche. And often the questions that people have are very specific to their organization and not necessarily, a useful conversation for the whole group to be witness to. So what we're going to do is my colleagues, Emily and Christina, are just going to keep an eye on the chat for any clarifying questions. So if you have any questions that you think that they could answer as we go in the chat, just pop them in there and they'll do their best to answer everything. If it's a more detailed question, we just encourage you to reach out to us by email at europe@wheel.ie. And we'll be able to get back to you with a more tailored response at that point that's specific to your needs. Obviously, we may well be inundated after this session, so it might take us a few days to get back to you, but we will get back to you. So that's our kind of solution, rather than opening the floor to a Q&A, which could get a little bit unwieldy with a group this size. So we're going to get started and look at how EU funding works. I'm not going to go into exhaustive detail. As I said, you don't need to know a lot about how EU politics or policy works, but it can be very helpful just to have a general idea, so that it can kind of help navigating the landscape a little bit easier, and also connecting the dots between EU policy and the programs so that you can make kind of stronger applications. So the first thing we're going to look at is the multi-annual financial framework, or the MFF, this is one of the first pieces of jargon people will usually encounter when they're starting with EU funding is, the term MFF is kind of thrown around a lot, but it's basically the EU's long-term budget, and it runs according to seven-year cycles. So I think I alluded earlier that the last one ended in 2020, and we are now in the 2021 to 2027 period of EU funding. So even though it's a year in, we're still kind of in a bit of a transition at the moment. There were significant delays with the budget this time around because of probably COVID and Brexit, and there was, I know, a lot of issues with some member states. So it took, any time that it changes an MFF, it can be, there's a lot of upheaval and there's a lot of newness to get used to. But I think this time it took even longer than normal. However, at this point, most programs have been released, and we're even starting to see those ones that were delayed until 2021. They've even started to release updates and some deadlines now, so that's really good. And I suppose it's really good timing because of that. We're seeing more and more deadlines coming out, and it's a good time in general just to get started, to kind of get to grips with EU funding, because the knowledge that you get now and the kind of research that you do now and capacity building that you do now will serve you for 7 years. So that, these programs are going to be around for 7 years. So it's a good time to invest in your knowledge and capacity in this area. So the good thing about this year as well is that, number one, we have this brand new MFF, but also it's the biggest budget that we've ever had. We have the usual kind of MFF budget that you get every year, which was already increased, was already bigger than any of the ones that we had before. But in kind of tandem with that, they've also made additional budget lines available this year that are kind of complementing the usual MFF. So that includes Next Generation EU, which is a kind of whole, it's related to COVID and the need for, I suppose, kind of radical change and rethinking of our society. And then there's also the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which is a lot more kind of practical loans and grants, specifically in relation to recovery from COVID. And then another kind of budget line that is now available to Ireland specifically, is the Brexit Adjustment Reserve. Well, we're getting 1/5 of that. So this is to help member states that would be most impacted by Brexit kind of recover from it. So the fact that we're getting 1/5 of that, I suppose, demonstrates that there is an awareness that it is, very much affecting Ireland. We haven't seen how that will be spent yet. It's just been confirmed that we will be in receipt of that. So this is what the usual kind of MFF looks like. So you can see the usual budget there. And then, just to get the scale of it, the proportion is that extra 750 billion, and what a huge addition that makes to the usual MFF that we would have. So a massive amount of money when you see it like that. And then I suppose just to kind of illustrate when I mentioned earlier that it's about, it's not necessarily that you have to understand all of EU policy, but it can be handy just to understand how policies become funding programs. So funding programs are kind of thematic. So there's things like a funding program around education and around environment and interregional, and we look at them in more detail very soon. But they're also referred to as these kind of financial instruments, and they're there to push policy into action. That's the purpose of funding programs. Each funding program will have a work program that it will publish annually. It has an overall program for the whole 7 years, and then it kind of complements it by these work programs and updates it. That allows it to be kind of flexible to what happens and what the needs are and how these things change. And it sets things like priorities and conditions and timetables and all that kind of thing. And the programs are there to deliver on policy objectives. So what you see there in that kind of little diagram is you can see that policy becomes programs, which then fund projects. And I suppose the opportunity is that a lot of projects, the results of projects, which can be research, it can be activities, it can be, even policy documents can be produced via various projects that are funded through these programs. They then go on and influence future policy. So, by engaging in programs, you do have this opportunity to influence future EU policy. But also, when you're writing projects trying to get funding through a specific program, it obviously helps to link it back to the policy and to really demonstrate how your project is going to deliver on key aspects of whatever the underpinning policy is that led to the development of that program. So it just kind of goes to show that it is all connected. You don't have to understand everything, but having, you know, understanding that all of these things are linked, and that by linking your project back to policy, it's going to be more, there's going to be more chance of success. It can be really helpful. So yeah, just a note before people, sometimes people can get very excited when they see those kind of billions upon billions of euro. It might look like a lot of money, but it is across the whole of the EU, obviously. And there's a lot of money set aside for, you know, neighboring countries and EU aid to other countries around the world. And also a lot of it is absorbed by governments into things like big infrastructure projects and stuff like that. So in reality, you know, the budgets that are actually available to civil society in various member states, I mean, they're great, and they're very, you know, there's lots of potential there, and they're definitely something to look into, but it's not, you know, you're not dealing with billions and billions of euro. And it is quite, you know, to access that money, it can take a lot of time. They have a lot of systems to ensure that, you know, it's not quick, it's not easy, and it doesn't, you know, you're not going to be able to get money kind of very reactively to things. It needs to be something that you proactively plan. And there's a lot of kind of terms and conditions attached to it that you have to adhere to. So, you know, just to set some expectations there. If you're looking for something quick and easy and you see those types of numbers, you know, don't get too excited. One thing I will say though is that in this financial framework, there is more of a kind of push for what's called citizen involvement. So more and more programs are looking to involve citizens and communities. And obviously our sector, the community voluntary sector, is usually the representative body for a community of people or a geographical community, or, you know, citizens. So there's even more of a role now for the community voluntary sector than there ever has been before. Just to note characteristics of EU funding. So if you do find, you know, we'll present kind of a bunch of different programs this morning, and hopefully some of them will be relevant to your organization. But I suppose once you've found one that is got potential, what can you expect from EU funding, and what does it look like? So the first thing to do is, I suppose, what EU funding is. So it is an opportunity to learn and share, to connect with and influence policy, kind of harking back to that kind of little graph that I showed there, the little diagram that I showed, that you know, a lot of projects, when designed well, can have a real impact on how future policy is created. It's an opportunity to be innovative. So, you know, the one thing about EU funding is that it's doesn't usually fund kind of business as usual, but it can be a real chance to kind of develop something new and different, maybe something that your organization has never done before. And it can be a chance as well to kind of fast track those strategic objectives. So, you know, to get that kind of injection of funding that you need to develop this new and innovative thing. Maybe there's been something you've been meaning to do for a long time. This is an opportunity to kind of build a project around that and kind of fast track it. It's an opportunity to collaborate with partners. Not all EU funding, but a lot of EU funding it requires some element of partnership. And we really encourage people to look at that as a positive, as something that can be of real benefit to their organization. So look at it as an opportunity to collaborate with partners rather than kind of an inconvenient requirement. And obviously it's an opportunity to kind of build capacity and organizational profile. One thing we often say to organizations is that you know, EU funding is probably some of the most challenging funding you'll deal with. It's very competitive, and there's high standards in terms of reporting and project management and delivering on objectives and all of that. But having said that, once you do it, every other funding can kind of seem easy by comparison. And it really helps to kind of professionalize your organization, to start putting standards in place, really good systems that will serve you, you know, for years to come. So it's a good investment into your capacity and into the skill and knowledge of your staff as well. But it also as well, you know, obviously having EU funding and operating on that international level is really excellent for your organizational profile as well. So there's lots of kind of opportunities in it, but just again, in that kind of vein of expectation setting, it's important to say what it's not as well. So I've alluded to this already, but it's not quick. Usually you can be waiting around for the right deadline to come along. Then you apply for it. It can take them 3 months to assess it, and then it can take them, it can take another couple of months to even get the kind of grant agreed. So if you're thinking, oh, I have a thing in June that I need some funding for, like, no, in January, EU funding is not for you. And then it's not easy. As I said, it is quite challenging. It's worth building that capacity, and it's a huge investment into your staff and into your future, and into kind of diversifying your funding and strengthening your organization. But with that means it's not easy. It's not without risk. So EU funding primarily, almost exclusively, funds projects. So, and projects are inherently risky. That's why we call them projects. They're not operational work. So, there has to be, your organization has to be kind of robust enough to take on a certain amount of risk. There are always risks that, something will go wrong in the project. So maybe there'll be a international pandemic, which, that happened in one of our projects, and we had to rethink, okay, how are we going to deliver this project remotely, because we can no longer do it as planned. Maybe there'll be all kinds of different things that can happen. So you have to be ready to deal with kind of risk. You can't guarantee everything, but there's lots of things that you can do to kind of mitigate and reduce the risk, which we can help you with, but it's not completely without risk. So that's something that you have to be aware of. It's not core funding mostly. So there are some exceptions of kind of things called operating grants, but by and large, it won't kind of keep the lights on and doors open. This is project-based funding, so it can fund staff time, and it can make some contributions to overheads. It'll fund activities, it'll fund subcontracting costs and outgoing costs and things like that, but it won't fund, it won't be a contribution to core, not significantly anyway. You're not going to get that kind of everyday funding or unrestricted funding. And then it's not national funding mostly. There are some exceptions to this, and we look at that when we go into more programs in more detail, and we start looking at each one. There are some programs that are national, but by and large, when you're getting involved in EU funding, it's to be prepared for that element of partnership, that you will have to collaborate transnationally and have various EU partners. Most of the time that will be the case. And I suppose it's on that topic that I said we'd have a little closer look at partnership. We've kind of touched on it here, but it can be a real challenge for a lot of organizations. And I suppose we at Access Europe at the wheel, we're aware of that. So we have kind of a number of supports available to assist with that. So Emily mentioned our training that's going to happen in April, that you're free to sign up to. It's part of this series of training where we will take a kind of deeper dive into how to build EU partnerships. But we also have a partner base, or a partner database, I should say, that I'm going to hand over to my colleague Christina to talk about now. So Christina, I'll manage the slides, but you can come in here.
Yes, thank you, Emma. Should I also first talk about Access Europe?
Well, you can kind of mention, I suppose, or I could skip over this one if you like.
Yes, I think it's good. Let's do that in the end. So, okay, great. So that we have a focus on the partner database. And so, hi, my name is Christina. Happy to meet you all. The partner database that I will be talking now a couple of minutes about was just launched in December, and I'm pretty sure that some of you have heard of it already, because I saw some names in the participants list. Here are today some organizations who have already set up a profile in this database, which is great, and I will show you in a second how it looks online and live. But first of all, I would like to very quickly show you how the process works. It is for you if you are an Irish civil society organization looking for partners for you funded projects. And we just heard from Emma that partnership is crucial for you projects, but it also that it can be tricky to find the right partners, especially in other European countries, if you don't have yet a European network. And with this platform, with this tool that we did build, we would like to make your work, your life easier. So the process is pretty easy. You create a profile. We will share the link in the chat in a second. Then you have the possibility to present your organization and to show your funding goals, your strengths, and what your interests and focus. And then in the end, you can be invited into EU projects. So other European organizations will be able to find you. And I will now, Emma, if you would stop your screen sharing, then I will show you online live how that works. So this is the database, and you see already that here are a lot of beautiful profiles. We have around 40 by now. And what you can do, I will just show you how it works. So for example, you see them all here now, right? So, but as a European organization who comes probably from France, let's say, I say I would be interested to find someone who does cultural and artistic innovation, but is also working in the digital space, does education and training and rural development. So you have these filters over here. You can filter by interest and by focus, as you can see. So what you can see is that it now reduces to a couple of organizations. And the possibility then is to click into the single profiles and to look at the organizations. So I would be interested now in the Limerick Youth Service because they look so nice. And you have then the possibility to present your organization, and it works like this. So it's short and clean. So we really wanted to keep it simple here. So you have a description of your organization. You have the possibility to get in contact directly. You have the facts on top, the website, social media. You learn about this organization, the focus, the interests, and here comes the most important part, which is the part of the EU project experience. So in the case of the Limerick Youth Service, they already have substantial experience. So they worked with a couple of Erasmus Plus funding. They did European solidarity projects. But, and this is very important, don't worry if you don't have EU experience yet. And I saw it in the poll in the beginning, a lot of organizations are here. So I would say 50% of the profiles already set up in the database right now state that they have no experience yet in EU project or in EU projects, which is totally fine because Access Europe is exactly here to help you and support you and advise you. So if you state that you have none, we make sure that the organizations who are reaching out, that they know, but there is Access Europe and they are not alone. So no worries about that. This is exactly the goal that we want to, right? So, but still, if it comes to stating your funding goals and strength, I would highly recommend to put some thought into that and to think about it. So even if you haven't worked in your projects before and you fill out this profile, your profile, and you set it up to say, okay, but what do I really want? Because the first step, and also what Emma mentioned, is it's all about the development of your organization. So you should know what are your goals, what are your strengths, what can you bring into your projects. So also filling out this profile, setting it up for your organization is kind of a first step to create this EU development strategy, which is actually very important. So you have the possibility here to put up pretty pictures, a video, and then here is the contact button. So the organizations from other EU countries who are looking at this profile saying, okay, this is really interesting, they can reach out directly. So how does it work to set up the profile? I will be very quick because you can have a look yourself. You just click on the button up here in the right corner, create EU profile. It brings you to a kind of a support page where you have the possibility to watch this quick video. We provide some tips and tricks. You also have here the possibility to download a PDF with all questions, because the form, when you fill it out, it will be about like 10 minutes only, but you can't save in between. So if you would like to prepare yourself, download this PDF, and then you click on register, and it brings you to the form. And again, it's about like 10 minutes, but put some thought into this. We would recommend that. And then it asks you questions. If you are a civil society organization, yes, then it asks questions about your organization, about the experience. When you have filled out this registration form, after a couple of days, you will appear here in the partner database. Maybe I will reach out to you and let you know, okay, it's up there, but it would be great if we could get more pictures or maybe more content in this section. So this could happen, or if you have questions, you can of course also all the time reach out to me. After you set up this profile, you will not be able to change it or to adjust it yourself, but you can always write to me and I'm super happy to update the content if needed. Okay, yeah, and very important, we will start the EU campaign very soon. So that means that we will distribute this platform all over the European member states, all EU member states. So via our networks, via national contact points. So if you want to be with us from the start, set up your profile this week or next week so that we make sure we will communicate this platform more often, but we will start this EU campaign very soon. And of course, make sure that also the European civil society organizations see your profile and reach out to you. So that it is.
Great, thank you very much, Christina. That's an excellent overview of our platform. Let me just, I'm going to reshare my slides, and while I do that, I'm just going to address, I was answering some kind of questions in the chat box there as you were speaking, Christina. So just to note that Access Europe, the advice and the support of Access Europe and our partner database have nothing to do with your membership of the wheel. You are absolutely, whether you're members or not, you're more than free to reach out to us, and we'll help you around anything to do with EU funding. So obviously we'd encourage you to join the wheel, but you don't have to join the wheel at all to avail of our supports and services. So just to be aware of that. And I did kind of note in the chat box there that we might be a little bit inundated after today's training with different kind of queries about EU funding and, you know, specific to your organization. But so it might take us a while to get round to everybody, but we will get round to everybody, and we welcome you to, you know, have a think about what would you like to achieve through EU funding, what kind of project idea do you have, and then our role really is to help you find, okay, this is the program you need to look at, and this is what the opportunities are for that particular type of idea. So just to kind of illustrate, these are the types of programs that we're talking about. So it's a bit of a messy table, but it will make a little bit more sense by the time I'm finished explaining it. But as you can see, this goes on for 2 slides. There's a lot of different programs that are available. And thankfully for most of these programs, there is a national contact point who are absolute experts on that specific program and know all of the ins and outs and all of the details on their specific program. So a lot of the time in Access Europe, we're kind of signposting you to, you know, okay, you need to talk to for Erasmus Plus, say, for example, it sounds like that's an Erasmus Plus project. You know, we can help you to design it and kind of flesh it out, but you need to talk to Leargers because they're the national contact point for Erasmus Plus. Sorry, so for a lot of our advice is about that. So Access Europe is essentially kind of a central hub. We provide the kind of wraparound supports. So things like help with partnerships, we can help with reviewing applications, we can help with kind of general advice, and then signposting to the national contact points who are the absolute experts, and they can help you with the more technical details of that specific program. So just to reiterate that is available to everybody. It's publicly funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs, so it doesn't depend on your wheel membership, and we encourage you to reach out to us, but just bear with us if it does take us a little while to get back to you. But back to this beautiful table. So what this is it's an overview, I suppose, of the different European programs that are available from 2021 to 2027. This isn't all of them, but it's most of them that are most applicable to civil society. We have to try and, you know, focus on the ones that had the most potential or were most relevant, because otherwise we could kind of be here all day. And what I've done is I've just, for those of you who do have a little bit more experience and maybe remember the previous MFF, I've kind of designed it like this to give you a bit of an overview of what's changed since the 2020 MFF ended. So this will hopefully illustrate to you what's different in the new 2021 to 2027 one. And it'll give any of the kind of newbies an oversight into all the different programs that are out there. And what we will do is we're going to go through this in a little bit more detail. We'll go through each program and have a look at it. And I have examples for most of them, so you can see what kind of project funded under this program looks like. But I wanted to just do this kind of overview first. So some of you might have heard of Horizon 2020. So that was the EU fund. That's the EU funding program for research and innovation. So that ran up until 2020, obviously. So now it's going to be called Horizon Europe. It's kind of bigger and better than ever. It's got about, I think it's 95 billion, or is it 96 billion euro funding. So it's the world's largest research and innovation program, and it's a massive program. And we'll have a look at a bit more detail there. It is mainly catered towards kind of research institutes and industry and university, but there is a role for civil society in it, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail shortly. Again, some of you might have been familiar with the European Social Fund. And as well as that, the European Programme for Employment and Social Innovation, which is kind of abbreviated to EASY. So in this programme, in this new MFF, both of those have combined into ESF Plus. So that will be overall the European Social Fund makes up the vast majority of it, but the EASY, kind of that smaller programme EASY, has been absorbed into it, and it'll be a strand now within ESF Plus. You'll often see that in EU programmes. When one bigger programme absorbs another smaller programme, it becomes a plus. So you'll see lots of pluses in EU programmes. So that's what that means. So that's that one. And then there's some of you again might have heard of the Rights, Equality and Citizenship Programme, or the REC programme. And then Europe for Citizens. I'm sure many of you heard for that because it's very specific to our sector. And also the wheel was the national contact point for Europe for Citizens up until it ended in 2020. You know, you might have heard of those ones. So the update about that for 2021 to 2027 is these were two kind of similar size programs. So they've been melded together. So they're not a plus because one didn't absorb the other, but they've been melded together. So they get this brand new identity, which is the Citizenship, Equality, Rights and Values Programme, or the CERV programme. So this combines those previous two programmes together and looks at all things citizenship, equality, rights and values. So there hasn't been a contact point designated for that yet in Ireland, but there's loads of opportunities under that programme. That's one that definitely all civil society groups need to be looking at. The Justice Programme, that's continuing as it was. There's a continued programme agreed kind of link there where you can read about it. And again, we'll look at all of these in a little bit more detail. The Erasmus Plus programme, it's the same programme with some additional features and a much increased budget. So I think that their budget tripled. I'm not actually 100% sure about that, but they were talking, it's definitely been massively increased. So there's lots of new potential under Erasmus Plus, with more or less the same rules as the last programme, just some kind of new little bits and pieces. Similarly for the European Solidarity Corps, this was a new programme last time round. It was actually only released properly, I think, around 2018. So it's a very kind of young programme, but it's a really interesting one for our sector because it funds volunteer projects here in Ireland and abroad. So it's really interesting for anybody working with volunteers or in the area of youth or anything like that. You definitely need to be looking into the European Solidarity Corps. It's a really accessible programme with lots of different opportunities. And again, we'll look at it in a little bit more detail later. The LEADER programme, again, I'm sure everybody's probably heard of LEADER. It's a rural development programme. So this is one of those examples of a national programme as well. ESF Plus now is also a national programme. But LEADER is one of those ones where it's kind of the Irish government is given the funding and they allocate it through a thing called the LEADER programme. So it's what we call decentralised. It's not managed by Brussels, it's managed by the Irish government. So at the moment, there's been a delay of the official kind of LEADER programme, won't be out until 2023, and a transitional fund has been established to kind of tide us over until that point. So you can click through there to read about that. And again, you know, all of these slides, all of these links will be provided. The LIFE programme is another one that's very interesting. There's some national opportunities, but that's a bit of a mixture. Sometimes it can be a national project, sometimes it has to be an EU project, but that's the programme to do with environment and climate and biodiversity. So a really interesting one for any environmental groups that might be here. The Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund, that's also been continued. That sits within the Department of Justice. That's another example of a kind of decentralized national fund where it's managed by the Irish government and it's not managed direct from Brussels. There's various Interreg programs that Ireland falls into, mainly the Northwest Europe, the the Atlantic program, the Atlantic area program, and the Northern Periphery Arctic region. So there's Interregs or interregional programs, and there's loads of them all over Europe, but only, you know, as a country, you only fall within certain regions. So that's why we are in just a few kind of interregional programs. So that's a really interesting one. And what we saw last year was there was a kind of delay in the Interreg programs, and now is a really good time to learn about them because they're just starting to release their first calls over the next few months. Again, lots of people would have heard of the Peace 4 program. So this is primarily a program for Northern Ireland and the border counties. That's now become Peace Plus. And we know that when it has a plus, it means it's absorbed a smaller program. So Northern Ireland used to be part of a smaller kind of Interreg program. So Peace Plus has absorbed that now. So we have a bigger, larger, much more ambitious program than ever before. So that's, again, a really interesting one if you're on the border counties, and we're going to look at all of these in a little bit more detail shortly. There's also the health program. It was called the third health program in the last MFF. Now it's been completely kind of rethought. I think it's been very much influenced by the pandemic, obviously, that they've decided to kind of radically rethink their health program. So now it's called EU for Health. And again, there's a link there where you can read more about that. It is more kind of aimed at kind of medical systems and modernizing kind of medical systems in various countries, and medical research. But there are sometimes opportunities for civil society groups in the area of health. So it's one that's worth looking at. Creative Europe, again, for any of the Creative Europe or creative organizations that are here, or arts organizations, or to do with media or film or anything in that area, that program is continuing and it's been increased, and you can read about it there. And then there's talks of 2 new programs. I haven't actually seen any updates about when these programs are going to start releasing calls or anything like that, but we've been promised that there'll be a Digital Europe program, which should, you know, theoretically have some opportunities for our sector to kind of digitalize and modernize. And then the Just Transition program, which is all around, I suppose, the twin transitions, the digital transition and the green transition, and making sure that nobody is left behind in that process. So again, that might be one that's interesting to a lot of organizations, and we'll have a look at what's been released about that so far. But like I said, these are new, so there's not a lot of information about them. So these are the programs that we're going to look at today. As you can see, there's quite a few of them, and we're going to go into each one and have a look at what are the main priorities. Well, what is it? What are the main priorities? What kind of potential does it have for our sector? And what, you know, where I found an example of a project that kind of gives a little bit of context to what can be funded through it. But it is a lot, as I said, and this is a huge amount of information, and it can get quite technical. So what we're going to do is take those kind of small breaks throughout to give everybody's brain a little bit of space to breathe, so that we don't overwhelm you with information. And we're going to take the first one now. So we're just going to take little 5-minute breaks. So it's 10:42 now. We can come back around 47 or 48. So 10:47 or 48. So we encourage you to grab some tea or coffee, get up and move, but don't look at a screen, and to give your mind a little bit of a break for a few minutes. And we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, so we're back. Hopefully everybody got a bit of a chance to move and to give their brains a little bit of a break, because we're going to head in now to look at the kind of deeper dive of the different programs and what the potential is. So I think a lot of programs are very, kind of multifaceted. There's a lot of different opportunities for different types of organizations under each program. So hopefully these will all be interesting to you, but we'll jump in now with Horizon Europe. So there we go. Okay, so the first program, as I said, is Horizon Europe. If you remember from the table, this used to be Horizon 2020 in the previous program, and it rebranded in 2021. So it's the EU's key funding program for research and innovation, and it has a budget of over 95 billion euro. It tackles things like climate change, helps to achieve the UN sustainability goals, or the SDGs, and boosts the EU's competitiveness and growth. So in terms of, there's three themes in the new Horizon Europe program. So the first one is science and technology. So this is the EU science and technological excellence, and strengthening the European research area. So this is encouraging, I suppose, various member states and other partners outside of the member states to work together around scientific excellence and research to kind of, I suppose, help Europe compete on the global stage when it comes to research and innovation. There's also this society theme. So this is, I suppose, the one that's probably most relevant to our sector. And this is around tackling specific policy priorities that the EU has, including the green and digital transitions, but also the SDGs. And then there's the economy. So it's boosting Europe's innovation, uptake, competitiveness, and jobs. So there's the three themes that you're kind of looking at with Horizon. And I think you'll see there's lots of potential for civil society to play a role in delivering on those different things. But in terms of the structure, you're looking at different pillars. So you have the pillar 1, which is the excellent science pillar. So this is things like that European Research Council. There's also things, the Marie Sklodowska-Curie action. So this is really interesting one for our sector because it allows a researcher from anywhere in Europe to come and work in an organization. Usually it's in a university, but it can be in a civil society group to do research on a specific topic. And it can be fully funded for, I think it's definitely up to a year, but sometimes up to 2 years. We will have an event around the MSCA actions later on this year with the contact point that is in the Irish University Association. So Yvonne Halpin is the contact point there. So we'll be doing an event with her later on in the year where you can learn more about this. But that's a tremendous opportunity to get essentially a fully paid member of staff to work specifically on research. And you can just partner with a university or research institute to do that. So that's, when it comes to the excellent science pillar, you might look at it and think, oh, that's not really for civil society, but there is some opportunities there. Pillar 2, though, I suppose, is the one that is more specific to our sector. So it looks at things like health, culture, creativity, inclusivity, civil security, digital industry space, climate and energy and mobility, and then food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, environment. And then in the pillar 3, you're looking at the Innovation Council, different innovation ecosystems, and the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. So, and all of it kind of is underpinned by kind of encouraging more and more EU countries to participate and kind of collaborate together to I suppose, amplify the impact and the strength of their research. So that's the kind of European research area. An example of a project here is this Reinvest, investing in the right to a home. It's Housing Happen Hub. So this was a Horizon 2020 project, and it was research focused on the experience of lone parent families living in emergency homeless accommodation. It's part of this Reinvest project, and it investigates the societal challenges of underinvestment in social services and trends in service sectors. So I chose this example because it illustrates something called engaged research, which I think this is where our sector has potential in Horizon. So for the vast majority of organizations in our sector, leading a Horizon application is not really a possibility. They're massive and ridiculously competitive, usually need to involve a wide range of partners from multiple sectors, and you have to be extremely detailed in the application in terms of the science, the research, the innovation kind of value of the proposal. Essentially, the program is geared more towards universities and research institutes and industry. However, there is definitely a role for our sector to play when we use this approach called engaged research. So this is about academia and research working together with civil society and with community and voluntary group and with citizens to tackle shared problems together. And in this case, a civil society group could be brought in as a partner into a Horizon Europe proposal and could maybe lead a work package or an output or something like that. So they play a role and they benefit from the funding, but they definitely don't have to go through the process of applying, which is really beyond the scope of most civil society organizations. So there's, there's real opportunities for civil society groups. So in the whole area of societal challenges, like we have expertise on the specific societal challenges and the impact that they're having on communities. We have access to communities and can enable kind of ethical access for researchers to come in and work with a specific community. These kind of things are often kind of out of reach for a lot of research institutes and universities. And this whole approach of engaged research, or nothing about us without us, is another kind of term you might have heard. This is being very much favoured by the EU in this new framework. They're seeing that in order to get better and more impactful results and to really mainstream the results of research, it's necessary to involve, the people who are the target of that research. So it's sometimes called as well the quadruple helix approach, where it's industry, research, public authorities and citizens all working together to address problems. And it's recognized that this is, in order for us to reach the SDGs and to really deliver an impact, that this is actually a necessary step. So that just means that there's even more opportunity for civil society groups like yourselves to partner with researchers and make available your knowledge, your expertise, the networks that you have to be integrated into projects around societal challenges and things like that. So this is something that I think is really interesting, and this project is an example of that. So it looked at qualitative research with peer researchers in a group of families in a family hub in Dublin over a 10-week period, and introducing them to the right to housing and co-producing new insights into the impacts of HAP and the Family Hub emergency accommodation. And it also interviewed staff of these organizations and policy experts and practitioners. So this was Maynooth University partnering with Focus Ireland for this project, and it was funded by Horizon 2020. So that's an example of how your organization might be able to partner with a research institute, where hopefully it's a mutually beneficial relationship where we can you get research that will benefit your work, and they get access to communities that they want to conduct research on. So just a note on that, it was launched in Ireland in 2021. So if you want to watch the launch of the Horizon Europe programme, it's you can click there and watch the full event, because it gives you a good outline of what it is and what they hope to achieve. There's a Horizon Europe Irish website. The contact Enterprise Ireland are the main contact point. There's several contact points for all the different strands of Horizon Europe, but they're all kind of operated from Enterprise Ireland, and you can see where the Commission have summarised them there. So if any of that looks interesting, we definitely encourage you to reach out to the national contact points, and certainly reach out to us, I suppose, in the first instance, to help us kind of, to help you put form to your project and see if we can advise you in any way, and then we can link you in with the relevant Horizon contact points. The next one that we're going to look at is the European Social Fund Plus, or what we're calling ESF Plus. And as I said before our break, this combines the previous European Social Fund with the EU programme for Employment and Social Innovation, or the EASY programme. So this is going to be called ESF Plus from now on. So ESF Plus, so it's the EU's main instrument for investing in people with the aim of building a more social and inclusive Europe. So you can see already that it's quite relevant to our sector. It finances the implementation of the principles that underpin the European Pillar of Social Rights. So that's the policy that it's designed to deliver on, just harking back to our circle diagram earlier. The priorities for this programme are about creating and protecting job opportunities, promoting social inclusion, fighting poverty, developing the skills needed for the digital and green transition, investing in young people, and addressing child poverty. So it's a huge programme. And you can see those kind of priorities outlined there. And the total budget for the whole of Europe is 88 billion. So you can see how it'll work here. This is the structure, the various components of it. There's the traditional kind of ESF focus on employment, education, and social inclusion. But this time in this program, you're also seeing it kind of absorb the Europe Aid program, so the European Aid for the Most Deprived, or the FEED program. You can see that little box there. So some of you might have been familiar with that. I know a lot of different charities were using the FEED program, particularly homeless charities. So it kind of has absorbed that. It's also there's also that investment in youth kind of strand that it's absorbing. There's a cross-cutting priority across many programs is health now, especially because of the pandemic. So there'll be a health component to it. And importantly, then it's the EU priority kind of actions and experimentation. So this is probably where we're going to see priorities and funding calls around social innovation and social enterprise and the social economy. So that's a really interesting one under that EASY program. So what we found is, like, this is obviously a very interesting program for our sector. What we've seen previously in the previous programs is that a huge portion of the funding that has been allocated through ESF and is decentralized out to the Irish government to distribute and to manage. Like a huge portion of that has been allocated to the public sector. So it's especially funding things like the education and training boards and initiatives like Youth Reach, for example, and many others. So in this program, now that there's this new MFF, we certainly hope that more of that funding could be ring-fenced for our sector and could be open for applications. So that's something that we're kind of hoping and that we'll keep an eye on over the next few months as calls. There hasn't been a proper call released for this yet. So as calls are released over the coming year, we'll keep an eye on that and keep everybody informed about it. But there is one nice example that I was able to find of an ESF funded project. So it's this EPIC project, Employment for People from Immigrant Communities. It's delivered by Business in the Community in Ireland, a movement for sustainable change in business that inspires and enables businesses to bring about a sustainable, low carbon economy and a more inclusive society. So this initiative of EPIC of theirs ran from 2017 to 2021. It provides specialized supports for migrants and refugees to help them integrate into Irish society. It was 1.925 million under ESF program for employability, inclusion and learning. And Katrina from Business in the Community was not only kind enough to let me feature her project, but even sent me these lovely pictures of them. They have their pre-COVID graduation class there, and then their post-COVID Zoom graduation class. So it's a fantastic program. It's impacted the lives of over 3,500 people from 101 different nationalities, and 68% of the program participants have found jobs or entered training or are volunteering in their area of interest. So that's really interesting. And it's a good example of a program there. ESF Plus, the managing authority for that, sits within the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. You can contact them there, and you can check out, they've got an excellent website, efunds.ie there, that I really encourage you to look at because they keep they focus on all different types of EU funds, but they have really excellent information about ESF Plus and any of the kind of government managed ones. The next one, and as I said, don't worry, we're taking breaks regularly, so I'm kind of running through them here. The idea is to give you a kind of quick overview of each one so that you can then have a think about maybe where a project might fit in, and maybe reach out to us so that we can help you navigate. But don't worry, we'll have another break soon because it is a lot. We're going pretty fast here. But the next program is the CERV program, Citizenship, Equality, Rights and Values. And as I mentioned when we were looking at the overall table, this is one that I think is really interesting for our sector and you should definitely keep an eye on. So this combines the previous programs, Europe for Citizens and the Rights, Equality and Citizenship program, as I said. For 2021 to 2027, it has a budget of 1.55 billion. So it's the biggest ever EU funding program for promoting and protecting fundamental rights, rule of law and democracy inside the EU. So to have a look at it, the overall objective of CERV is to protect and promote rights and values as enshrined in the treaties, in particular by supporting civil society organizations, so essentially our sector, in order to sustain open and democratic and inclusive societies. So again, you can see there that kind of harken back to how a program is there to deliver on policies. It's there to deliver in the rights and values that are enshrined in the treaty, or in the treaties, I should say. So how that looks then, that overall objective is transferred into kind of 3 strands. So there's the equality and rights strand, which is all about promoting rights. There's the citizens engagement and participation strand. And then there's the Daphne strand, combating violence. So you might think that one's a little bit out of place there. Like, why is it called Daphne? That's because back in the very old EU funding days of about maybe 2 MFFs ago, so pre-2014, there used to be a program that was just called Daphne that was about gender equality and combating violence against women and children. So that got absorbed into REC, and then REC and the Europe for Citizens programs got combined, and then we end up with these, but Daphne was kind of recognized as a brand, so they included it as one of the strands in CERV. So I'll show you an example of what a program might look like. So this is one that is managed by UNICEF. So it's Children as Champions of Change, or CCC NACOM. Obviously UNICEF, a very well-known organization operating in over 190 countries and territories to save children's lives, defend their rights, and to help them fulfill their potential from early childhood through to adolescence. So the project lead is UNICEF Ireland in this, and they partnered with various UNICEF branches around Europe, and they formed a project that was there to help increase awareness in key stakeholders about children's rights, support child rights schools to embed child participation and respect for child's rights in educational settings, to improve rights-based, inclusive, meaningful child participation and voice and influence in the public sphere. So it was a 2-year project. It was funded by the REC program right before it finished up. And I think now, if they were to pursue another round, it would be under the CERV program, obviously, because that's where that strand lives now. It's a grant of over 870,000, and it had partners from various UNICEF managing or national committees from all of those different EU countries. So a really interesting project. That's an example of what would have been an REC program back in the day that's now been involved in CERV. We have loads of examples of Europe for Citizens projects that were here in Ireland around things like volunteering and town twinning and European remembrance, remembering kind of key dates in European history. So there's all kinds of different projects that can be funded through CERV. It's a hugely diverse program. You can see some, I've linked there to an event that we did that showcased a bunch of different kind of citizenship type projects that were funded under that strand, as we used to be the national contact point for Europe for Citizens, so we have lots of really nice examples. So this is a really interesting one, I think, for our sector, and it's something to look at, and you can have a look at various different types of projects and just the diversity of organizations that applied for this funding, everything from kind of local councils to arts organizations, to volunteer centres. There's kind of something for everybody within CERV. So you can watch a little bit more about the old Europe for Citizens program here and understand how that will be translated into CERV. And you can keep up to date by looking at the CERV funding and tenders portal as well. There's calls open right now, so you might want to look at that. At the moment, the responsibility for CERV sits within the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, but there hasn't been an official NCP, an official national contact point appointed yet. So it's still a little bit watch this space for that, but that doesn't mean you can't go ahead and apply, obviously. And obviously Access Europe will do our best to kind of plug the gap, the fact that there's no NCP there to try and support applications. So that's something that's well worth looking at for our sector. Another one then is justice. If you remember back in the table, I put a note that the justice program has been extended, so there's no rebrand or anything here. I'm not going to go into huge detail on this one because it's pretty niche. But if anybody here works in the area of protection of civil liberties or criminal rights or rights of victims, it could be something that's interesting to you. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an example of a successful justice project in Ireland, at least not on the Commission's kind of website where they summarise all the successful projects that have been funded through the programme. But obviously, if you know of one, please do let me know, because I like to collect good examples. But it's a programme that funds funding to support judicial cooperation in civil and criminal matters, so training for legal practitioners and effective access to justice for citizens and businesses. It strengthens democracy and the rule of law and fundamental rights. It's 305 million for this MFF, so it's one of the smaller programmes, but as I said, it's quite niche. So if this is your area, it's not like you'd be facing as much competition maybe as some of the bigger programmes. and it's centrally managed. So there's no NCP in Ireland. I think it's related to the Department of Justice, but there's no official NCP in Ireland. With that, I think we're on to the next. This is our last one before we have another 5-minute break, just so that you know, because again, I'm aware that we're moving quite fast and it's a lot of information. But this is another one that I think is of huge interest to our sector, and I'd be very surprised if lots of people who counted themselves as being experienced in EU funding weren't involved in Erasmus Plus ones. It's one of a huge interest and potential for our sector. So Erasmus Plus is the EU's programme to support education, training, youth and sport in Europe. It's an estimated 26.2 billion, and that's nearly double the last MFF. So I think I mentioned that when I was doing the overview, that I knew that it had increased. But yeah, it's doubled in this one. So it's a big programme, and the EU is really invested in it. This programme will focus on social inclusion, the green and digital transitions, and promoting young people's participation in democratic life. So I suppose you might be starting to see kind of common threads among the different EU programmes, and that's because it's the same set of policies that underpin this programme. So just kind of harken back to that, how the policy goes on to influence the different programmes. It also supports, again, in terms of the policy that this programme is meant to deliver on, it supports the European Pillar of Social Rights, the EU Youth Strategy, and develops the European dimension in sport. So in terms of structure, it offers what are called mobility and cooperation opportunities. So mobility projects essentially cover staff and volunteers and other kind of target groups to travel around Europe, to learn, to study, to do job shadowing, things like that. So when we talk about mobility projects in EU funding, mobility is usually travel. So people will often say in the whole EU project space that they're going on a mobility, which doesn't really make sense in normal English, but in EU English, it means that they're going on a study trip or they're attending a course abroad, and it's funded by the EU because that's what the EU calls them. So that's kind of one half if they do these mobility projects. They also do what are called cooperation projects or collaboration projects. And these are more, I suppose, these can be various organizations around Europe teaming up to kind of tackle a shared challenge. And sometimes they just use it for kind of networking and discussion and trading best practice and all of that. So it can be kind of a small scale project that's just networking based, or, you know, if the bigger projects will allow those partners to come together and collaborate to build something or create something together. And I'll give an example of what that looks like now in a minute. So when we're talking about mobility and cooperation projects, this is what we mean. There are also things called structured dialogues that are funded by Erasmus Plus. So these are about bringing young people and policymakers together. So that's a whole other area, but we didn't want to go into too much detail here. So we said we keep it at that. So the different areas that it looks at, there's higher education, vocational education and training, school education, adult education, youth and sport. So they're the kind of different threads that Erasmus Plus focuses on. And I think the main one for our sector are definitely the vocational education and training strand has a lot of potential. This includes training for staff and practitioners within our sector. So for example, the Wheel has had success getting funding underneath this strand so that we can, you know, develop new courses and outputs that we can use to help train the sector. And I'll give an example of that now in a minute. But if you work with training professionals, whether it's youth workers, whether it's carers, anything like that, in any shape or form, you know, VET might be the right kind of avenue for you. The next thing is adult education is another one that I think could be really interesting for our sector. So this is where you're not working with professionals, you're working with the kind of general public. So you're providing some kind of educational offering for the general public or for non-professionals. Again, I think sometimes this throws a lot of organizations because they don't realize that, you know, they don't consider themselves an adult education organization. But you don't have to kind of identify as one to be engaged in educational projects. So for example, if you work with people who are experiencing homelessness and you want to develop kind of a career or a course in soft skills or pathways to independence for those people, I mean, that's an education project. And even though you might consider yourself, you know, well, we're a homelessness organization, we're not an adult education provider, the purpose of that project is adult education. So you could definitely apply. And similarly, you know, again, if you wanted to do a course for whether it's kind of more informal carers, like not professional carers, to do with older, or if you want to have a course for older people that you work with, that, you know, maybe is some kind of education around, you know, healthy lifestyle or lifelong learning or whatever. Even though you wouldn't necessarily consider yourself an adult education organization, you can apply because your project is about education, as long as the main goal is to educate. And as long as it's aligned with the Erasmus Plus program objectives, you can apply under this program, even if you don't just kind of consider yourself an educational institute. So that's just something that I think a lot of people, they look at Erasmus Plus. Well, for one thing, they look at Erasmus and they think of universities and think, oh, that's got nothing to do with us because of the Erasmus year abroad kind of thing. And that is part of the overall Erasmus Plus program, but there's so much more to it. Then when they look in a little bit further, they think, oh, it's for VET providers, or it's for adult education providers. It's got nothing to do with us. So a big kind of piece of what we end up doing a lot in Access Europe is trying to explain, actually, there's so many opportunities for our sector here. You just have to kind of rethink, you know, how you're looking at your project. If it's an education project, it belongs more or less within Erasmus Plus. And then obviously, I mean, the whole youth and sport things are very closely connected to our sector. So they're very interesting areas. If you're your youth organization or if your sport organization, you should definitely be looking into Erasmus Plus. So as I said, I promised you an example. So this is an example of a project. This is a VET project because this is one of the Wheels projects. You can click through and you can use it there because you know all of our innovations, our outputs that we produce live in that website. So it's called Scope, Skills Recognition, Capacity Building and Professional Education for the Third Sector. At EU level, you know, we tend to call the community and voluntary sector the third sector. So this was, it began in 2018. It had Irish partners, The Wheel and An Cason. And then we also collaborated with different partners from Scotland, Finland, Latvia and Estonia. And we developed an online learning platform, learning content and a validation system. And this was all funded through Erasmus Plus. And we made it a VET project because we were targeting professionals within the sector. If we had been targeting non-professionals like volunteers or, you know, a target group like what I said, like homeless people or people who are older or whatever, it could have been an adult education project. So just to demonstrate, we went with VET because we were working with professionals. And it aims to address the need for free, kind of high quality educational resources and recognition. We developed modules based on governance, fundraising, financial management, communications and risk management. And our total grant was over 290,000. So that's an example of a project. If you've been thinking, oh, we really need to develop a new course or a new education module or a new educational piece of technology or app or some kind of learning recognition system for your organization, I mean, that's an example of a project that was funded under Erasmus Plus. So absolutely, there could be potential for you to find funding for that, even if you don't consider yourself a training organization or an education organization. And just in terms of that, I've mentioned these before, but we're really lucky in Ireland. We have an excellent national agency for Erasmus Plus. They're actually a national agency for some other things as well, which I will mention throughout the rest of the presentation, but they're also the national contact point for Erasmus Plus. They provide really excellent trainings. Definitely sign up to their newsletters, keep informed about what they're doing, follow them so that you can see, like the good thing about Erasmus is it has predictable deadlines every year. So you can prepare, you're not waiting for deadlines to come out. You can prepare in advance. And like I said, you've got that excellent support service there with Lergus. Other things there is we have the Commission website, if you want to check that out. There's the Erasmus Plus program guide, which can look really intimidating. So don't worry if you see that and think, oh my gosh, this is impossible. It's like 300 pages long. You don't need to read all of it. But, you know, we or Lergus can help you navigate that. And then there's the application portal there if you wanted to have a look around that. But as promised, where are we now? We've done 5 programs. We're going to take another little comfort break for 5 minutes. Just to kind of give yourself a chance to digest all of that information that I've just poured onto you there. We've got 5 more programs after this, then we'll take another 5 minutes and then we'll be finishing up. So hopefully we're not overwhelming everybody, but it's 17 minutes past now. So we'll come back at around 22 minutes past or 23 minutes past. So I hope that's okay. Take your 5 minutes, don't look at a screen, and we'll see you soon. Okay, so we're back again. I hope that everybody was able to have a bit of a stretch and refresh themselves a little bit. I definitely did. So we're ready to face into the next bit. So hopefully it's not too much information, and we're taking it in nice manageable chunks. So the next thing we're going to look at is the European Solidarity Corps. So again, you might remember that I referenced this when we were looking at the table overview, that this is a newer program. It's one with huge potential for our sector. If you do anything with volunteers or young people, you need to be looking into the European Solidarity Corps. So what is it? It brings together young people and organizations to build a more inclusive society, support vulnerable people, respond to societal challenges and humanitarian challenges. And there are national and international opportunities. And I think you'll probably be picking up on the trend here that it's kind of unusual to get purely national projects. Most programs require some level of international cooperation. So this is, again, a huge opportunity that you could look at doing some local volunteering projects. So that's something, as well as sending people abroad to go on volunteering experiences. So there's huge potential there. The objectives are to empower young people to participate positively in their world, build an inclusive and democratic Europe, and promote sustainable development to projects at grassroots level. So you can read a bit more detail about them, but that just provides an overview. And there's a link there where you can look at the types of projects that can be funded. An example project would be this Art in Action project. So Art in Action was a 12-month creative project for children who were residing in direct provision accommodation in Cork. It was done in partnership with the UCC Fáilte Refugee Society and funded by the European Solidarity Corps. It enables children to have a positive creative experience and to learn art making skills that would allow them to better understand and share their own voice and views. So it's a really lovely project. Another thing, actually, I haven't inserted it here, but we'll include it in the follow-up, is we did an event with Lergus, and I'll mention that Lergus are the national contact point for this as well, where they've invited in a host of different young people and coordinators who were involved in European Solidarity Corps projects. So we had a panel discussion with them, and then we did a bit more of a deep dive into the opportunities that are available under the European Solidarity Corps, and that's all recorded on our YouTube channel. So I'll link that to you, even just to watch the stories of the young people that were involved, were just hugely inspiring and really just a lovely, lovely stories to listen to. So we'll actually link that in our follow-up to this session. So if you're interested in that, you can do a little bit more of a deep dive. It is a newer program, so it's still being kind of embedded and they're still building awareness about it. But again, Lergus is the national contact point for it. They have an excellent team there that can help you to get started with solidarity funding. The EU have done a lot to try and make it a lot more accessible. So you can do this kind of pre-qualification phase where you apply for a quality label, and that's just where they kind of check that your organization is eligible and you've done your kind of groundwork, and it means that the actual application process then when it comes to the deadlines is an awful lot easier. So they've made it really accessible for our sector. So again, it's just one that's really worth checking out, and we'd urge you to link in with Lergus about that. Leader, I'm sure everybody's probably heard of Leader. It's a very popular one in rural Ireland. So as I said, when we were looking at the overview, the aim of the Transitional Leader Programme is to allow locally led rural development projects to continue to be delivered using the current Leader model until the new programme comes out to 2023. So not much has changed in Leader from the last MFF. There might be changes in 2023 when they release the kind of new programme. A total of 70 million has been allocated to support rural communities and private enterprises over 2021 to 2022. The priorities, the key focus will be on capacity building within communities that have not received Leader funding to date and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's kind of an interesting development, I suppose. But they're also looking to support job creation, encouraging entrepreneurship, projects to address the climate agenda and digital transformation, and encourage rural communities to build on their existing strengths and assets. And there's a few kind of themes there, and you'll see that kind of encapsulated in these themes. There's the economic development and enterprise development, job creation, social inclusion, and rural environment there. So lots of interesting. If you're a rural organization, definitely be looking into Leader. There's huge potential in it. I'm not going to go through all of these because you'll get the results afterwards, but there's some nice examples of different Leader projects there that you can kind of click into and find out more about. So that's the types of things. Leader is kind of one of the few projects where you'll be able to fund kind of bricks and mortar type activities. The vast majority of EU funding, you're looking at programs and activities and outputs and innovation and research. They don't usually, EU structural funding is channeled through the Irish government. So this is the kind of bricks and mortar style projects like, renovating community hall or something like that. So that's all dealt with at national level. It's not, I suppose, for the EU to decide what Irish communities should build. So it just means that often we have to kind of disappoint people when they're looking for structural funding, more or less. They're looking for to invest in kind of bricks and mortar projects because there's not a lot of opportunities for that in EU funding. But Leader is one of those rare examples where there is that potential to actually build something from your funding. How national contact points, the way it's dealt with in Ireland is that there's local action groups, Leader local action groups or LAGs. So you can click through there to find your local action group and reach out to them. There's usually a kind of rolling deadline basis. So you can work with them and tell them what you're interested in, and they should be able to help you, understand, is this the right project for it? Or is this the right program for it, I should say, and how you can go about applying. As I said, there's example Leader projects there, so you can click through and have a look at what's out there and what's already been funded. And you can watch our Leader training series. So we worked with the consultancy group 2 into 3 last year, and they provided us, they did a 3-part training series with us, which it was a complete introduction to EU funding or to Leader funding. So it was, an introduction, how to design your project and how to write your project, that kind of thing. And there's a playlist on our YouTube channel where you can watch that back. So if you're interested in Leader, we really recommend that you have a look at that. There's the LIFE program. So again, any of you who work in the environment space or climate space will probably know about LIFE, but it's the instrument for environmental and climate action. There's a 60% budget increase in the budget this year, or for this MFF, I should say. So it's 5.4 billion now. 3.5 billion of that will be directed towards environmental projects, whereas 1.9 billion will be focused on climate action. So all live calls for proposals in 2022 are expected to be published on the Funding and Tenders portal on 17th of May 2022. So if you are an environmental organisation, even though the calls won't be published until May 2022, it's kind of time to start thinking about it now and having your concepts ready and being ready to act at that point, because you'll expect that deadlines will be probably starting around September then. So, you'll need lots of time to prepare for these types of projects, especially when they require EU partnerships, which not all of them do. Sometimes life funding can be national, but many of them do require that. So we kind of recommend the earlier the better. And you'll see these different kind of priorities there. So nature and biodiversity, circular economy and quality of life, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and the clean energy transition. And an example, improving corncrake conservation status in Ireland. So this was delivered by the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. And the overall objective is to improve the conservation status in Ireland of the corncrake by the enhancement of special protection areas, network and surrounding farmland. And the total budget for that project was over 5 million. So these can be really substantial projects. There are examples of kind of smaller level projects that you can do, but often life funding can be quite ambitious and large scale projects. So again, it might be that thing where maybe you're not writing the project, but you're networking with different partners, you're partnering with universities or different public bodies to deliver on this project, and you can be that kind of civil society representative voice in the project. There's the newsletter there if you want, or the website I should say, in the newsletter if you want to sign up and kind of follow along with that program. The contact point in Ireland is the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, and you can email them directly at life@decc.gov.ie. So that's another interesting one that's managed more or less nationally, and same with the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund. So this is national funding. It's allocated to each member state and they administer it. So the goal of this is to strengthen the common asylum policy, develop legal migration in line with the member state economic and social needs, support third country nationals to effectively integrate and be socially included, contribute to the fight against irregular migration. And the proposed budget for this MFF is 9.882 billion. So an example of a project funded under this program would be the Bridge project. It seeks to promote effective delivery of reception and integration services to asylum seekers and third country nationals in Galway City and County. It's coordinated by the Galway City Partnership and supported by the Department of Justice and Equality and funding partners including Galway City Council, Galway Rural Development, HSE, Youth Work Ireland, Galway and the Sports Partnership. So you can see all the different stakeholders that are involved there, and there's certainly a role for civil society groups to play in life consortiums. So it's worth formulating project ideas, networking with the various kind of players and starting those conversations so that when the calls are released, you're ready to potentially go for a deadline. This is managed by the Department of Justice, and there's further information that you can find on their dedicated website. So we're going straight into the Interregs. So again, you would have heard this and I mentioned it, that the Interregs are interregional programs. So all of Europe is divided up into different regions, and your country might fall within several different regions depending on the various programs. So Ireland is within at least 3 Interreg programs. We have 3 major ones anyway. So it helps to regional and local governments. There is a focus on local government here, but they are expected to work with various stakeholders. But it's helping them to develop and deliver better policy. It creates environment and opportunities for sharing solutions and policy learning. It aims to ensure that government investment, innovation and implementation efforts all lead to integrated and sustainable impact for people and places. And Ireland, as I said, is part of multiple interregional areas. So the way it worked was we're only starting to see the Interreg programs kind of releasing updates now. So there was a lengthy public consultation process last year and kind of review process, public consultation, partner approval. The program was finalized and then it was due to be released in January of this year. So we're starting to see that kind of happen now. And actually Interreg Northwest Europe, just in the last week, I think, or a couple of weeks, announced that it'll be opening its first call for proposals for the 2021 to 2027 programme period on Tuesday, 22nd of March, and the deadline will be 15th of June. Everything is Central European time usually. There's a fact sheet that you can read about there, and there will be a training about it on the 31st of March 2022. So that's really well worth looking out for. So that's just an example. There'll be lots of other deadlines coming from the various different Interregs that we're part of, but that's one that's coming up right now. There's a really nice example of a social enterprise that were partners in an Interreg project. So Skull, SCCUL, they're a social enterprise based in Galway, and they their project or their organisation, aims to champion societal change by promoting community, enterprise well-being and social inclusion. And their project, Biz Mentors, provided free access to business, enterprise and wisdom to people and businesses, social enterprises and community groups who may otherwise have had difficulty accessing such expertise. And the budget for this project, again, Interreg projects tend to be a lot bigger and in the kind of millions, not always, but a lot of the time. So this was a 1.3 million euro project between 5 partners over 3 years to develop a professional software that matches mentees to mentors. And it was co-funded by Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic Programme, or the NPA programme, which is one of the ones that we are eligible for. And it had partners from Finland, Iceland and Northern Ireland. So you can see all the different logos there of the different partners. So this is a really interesting program. Again, some organizations will have the capacity to apply, but a lot of the time it might be a partnership into an Interreg project. But we would definitely recommend that you reach out to the different contact points. So for Northwest Europe, which is one of the regions we're part of, it's Sarah Davern at the Southern Regional Assembly. For the Atlantic area, it's Brendan Mooney at the Northwestern Regional Assembly. And again, for the Northern Periphery and Arctic Programme, it's also Brendan Mooney at the Northern and Western Regional Assembly. So really interesting opportunities there. But again, there's a lot of information. So we're going to take our last and final 5-minute break before we finish up. I just have a couple more programs to go through and then our next steps. So let's just take a quick breather, have another quick stretch, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. What time is it now? It's 11:38, so we will be back at 11:43. And we'll be ready to finish up then. So thanks everybody. Bear with us for a little bit longer and enjoy a short break. Okay, and we are back for our final stretch. Thank you so much for bearing with us so far. I can see loads of questions coming in the chat. I think that Emily and Christina are doing a great job of kind of hoovering them all up and trying to address as many of them as possible. But if you don't get the answers that you need in the duration of today's session, don't worry about it. Just reach out to us directly. I'll put the email again up on screen and we'll happily get back to everybody if you give us enough time. So hopefully you are refreshed and ready for our last sprint towards the end. So we're going to jump directly into the Peace Programme, or what is now called the Peace Plus Programme, as I mentioned in the summary that we did at the beginning. So Peace Plus is a new cross-border EU funding programme for the 2021 to 2027 period. It will build on and continue the work of both the current Interreg VA programme. So there was another Interreg that got absorbed into the Peace 4 programme, and that's how we ended up with Peace Plus. So if you remember back at the beginning, when you see pluses in EU funding, it means that something got absorbed by a bigger programme. So Peace Plus will continue to support activities that contribute towards a prosperous and stable society in Northern Ireland and the border counties of Ireland, including activities that promote peace and reconciliation, contribute to the cross-border economic and territorial development. And you can see other ones here, building peaceful and thriving communities, delivering economic regeneration, transformation, empowering and investing in young people, healthy and inclusive communities, supporting a sustainable and better connected future, and building and embedding partnership and collaboration. And you can see there are significant budgets for each of those. So they've done a really comprehensive consultation process throughout all of 2021 to design this programme, and there's a real emphasis, at least, on the kind of questions that they were asking about streamlining it and making it more accessible. So it's a really interesting one. If you're based in a border region, it's definitely something that you want to be looking at. The border region includes Northern Ireland itself, and then the border counties of Cavan, Donegal, Leitrim, Louth, Monaghan and Sligo. This is the core programme area. However, there is some flexibility to include partners that are outside, or activity that's outside of that core programme area, if appropriate. So I'd say this is probably dealt with on a case by case basis, and it would be linking in with the national contact point to discuss that. So it's not something you'd completely rule out if you're not a border county, but it would be something that would have to be justified, I suppose. An example of a programme that's funded under this, or a project that's funded under this programme, is the Sharing from the Start. This is administered by Early Years Northern Ireland, who we actually worked with in the first phase of our Access Europe programme. So they're an excellent organisation, really experienced with EU funding, and they administered this programme, and it was a collaboration with the National Childhood Network and the Fermanagh Trust, and it aimed to engage almost 10,000 preschool children in shared activities on an ongoing and sustained basis. And the project was going on until 2021. So as well as receiving equipment, including laptops, projectors, webcams, and broadband infrastructure, the preschool staff also benefited from online training and virtual delivery methods. And it was €100,000 of funding from the Peace Programme was contributed towards that. So that's an example of the type of projects that can be funded, but there's a huge scope of projects that have been funded since Peace began. It's gone through, I think this is its 5th MFF now. So it's a long programme with a long history. And I know that they recently, it was last year, launched their kind of Peace platform, which showcases, it kind of acts as an archive for Peace over the years and showcases the various projects that have been funded. So that's well worth checking out, and that's all managed by the Special EU Programmes Body, or the SEUPB, in Northern Ireland. So they have built this platform. They're undergoing this huge long consultation period over the last year to try and streamline and improve on the Peace Plus programme. They have information on their websites there, and there's consultation reports as well in terms of what came out of their consultations that happened over the last year. So that's a very interesting one. Again, for all of these, these are just little tasters, but definitely reach out to us if one of them piques your interest and you want more information about it. EU for Health, as I mentioned, this is a new health programme. Before this, we had the first health programme, the second health programme, and the third health programme. Now they've rebranded and made it EU for Health. It's an ambitious response to COVID-19. Obviously, the pandemic had a major impact on patients, medical and healthcare staff, and in health systems in Europe. So the programme will go beyond crisis response to address healthcare systems resilience. So I think I mentioned this in when we looked at the table at the beginning, that it is mainly focused on healthcare systems, but there is still opportunities, as it says there, for NGOs from EU countries and non-EU countries to be involved. But it probably would be in partnership though with kind of health system bodies. And the budget for this is 5.3 billion, and they have different themes. So protecting and fostering health in the Union, protecting people in the Union from serious cross-border threats to health, improving medicinal products, medical devices and crisis-relevant products, and strengthening health systems. The 21 work programme, the last time I checked in, was under development, but actions would fall under 4 strands: disease prevention, crisis preparedness, health system and digital, and a cross-cutting focus on cancer. So you can see what it looks like there. There's the 4 priorities and the kind of underpinning one. You can check out more about this if you're in health or health research or caring for patients or anything like that in the area of health. I'd really recommend you have a look at the EU for Health website to find out more. There's also a national contact point, was appointed in Ireland in at the Health Research Board. It's Amanda Daly, and you can click through to see an article about that and an overview of the programme on the HRB website there as well. So that's one that's definitely worth checking out if you work in the area of health. Creative Europe then, if you're in arts, culture, film, media organisation, Creative Europe is an excellent programme to look at. It supports the culture and audiovisual sectors. This time around, it has a much increased budget of 2.44 billion. It aims to enhance artistic and cultural cooperation at a European level, encourage competitiveness, innovation and sustainability across the audiovisual sector, and it promotes cross-sectoral innovation and collaborative actions. And you can see the various kind of strands there. You've got culture, media and cross-sector. I have a nice example of a project. This was led by Imagination Scotland with partners in the ARC, Irish partners in the ARC, and several other partners as well. The goal of this project, Push Plus, was to stimulate European dialogue and initiate new artistic ideas and performances around topics that push us to take more risks as makers and presenters, and address the underrepresentation of different lives and bodies on our stage, and to tell stories that really connect with children and who they are. Each of those topics had a year-long focus with lab, residency, festival visit, and presentation kind of activities. So that's an example and a lovely picture there of a type of project that we funded under Creative Europe. The Creative Europe desk, so this is the national contact point for Creative Europe, sits within the Arts Council. So definitely reach out to them. You can click through and find out more information, and just stay tuned because we're actually looking at doing an event with the Creative Europe desk in the next couple of months, where we look at not just Creative Europe, but also all the other programs that might have potential for creative and artistic organizations. So stay tuned for that. The best way to do that, obviously, is to sign up to our newsletters and stuff like that, and our contact list, and obviously I'll share that towards the end. I mentioned in the overview that we have new programs promised to us, and that's Digital Europe and the Justice Programme. So I'll just very quickly look at those here. There's nothing, these are brand new, so I don't really know more about them other than what I've read on the website, but it's focused at bringing digital technology to businesses, citizens and public administrations. There's a Digital Europe website there, so we'll have to just watch this space and see what happens in it. But you can see there some of it's promised 1.3 billion and different kind of goals that are there. So interoperable public services, technology, digital and related technologies for industry and SMEs, tech development, digitalizing the public sector, offering tests and pilots to public administrations, and building and strengthening digital innovation hubs. So it could be a really interesting one for our sector, because obviously there's a real need for digitalization in our sector. The Just Transition Fund, then I mentioned that this is a new one that's been promised. It's related to the cohesion policy, and it aims to provide support to territories facing serious socioeconomic challenges arising from the transition towards climate neutrality. It will facilitate the implementation of the Green Deal, and it aims to make the EU climate neutral by 2050. There's a fact sheet there that you can read more about. And again, if you're an environmental organisation, this is one that's well worth following along. Obviously, Access Europe, our organization or our program within the wheel, will be following this one closely, and will keep people who are following our newsletters, our website, our events, our emails. We'll keep you all up to date about this as it unfolds, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. It's 17.5 billion is promised, and you can see that it's about alleviating major social economic costs, supporting that transition, and supporting diversification of local economies, creating new jobs and reskilling workers. So that is actually all of our programs. As I said, thank you very much for sticking with us. It's a lot, but the goal was to kind of give little tasters of each program. I'm sure there's over 100 here today. I'm sure at least, you know, for all of you here, at least one of those programs would be of interest. So hopefully it gives you a good overview of what's out there, and I suppose what EU funding programs look like. So it's worth hopefully worth tuning in and listening to all of those. Before we finish up in another 5 minutes or so, I just wanted to kind of touch on the whole pathways through EU funding thing. So maybe, you know, you're new, as we did the poll at the beginning, we can see that 75% of the organizations here are new to EU funding. Even more than, I think it was 18% maybe have just done 1 or 2 projects. So they might be looking at how can we be a little bit more strategic, and how can we scale up, and, you know, how can we use this this experience that we have. So I wanted to just quickly touch on this idea of how you can start navigating EU funding. We've had a deluge of information there. So how do you actually get started? So the first thing, as Christina alluded to at the beginning, would be maybe to set up a profile on our partner database. So first of all, being invited into an EU project that's relevant to your organization and that would be of interest to you is a great way to get started in EU funding. Coordinating a project can be challenging, whereas if you're invited in by a more experienced European partner to play a role in the project and to be a partner, it can be a really really rewarding experience, and you can kind of learn how to navigate all of this and how to deliver projects in a more lower stakes environment, because you're not the coordinator who's ultimately kind of legally responsible and in charge of all of the reporting and all of the admin that goes along with it. So it's a nice lower stakes environment to gradually build up your capacity and to build up a network of partners who you know and trust. So by setting up a profile on our database, obviously we're going to be promoting that database very heavily out towards Europe through all the different national contact points and all the different EU networks, in the hope that more Irish organisations will get invited into projects. So by setting up a profile, you're obviously increasing the chance that that will happen. But also, you know, it's not just about promoting your organization. As Christina said, it also helps you form a strategy. So by filling out the application and really having a think about, well, what are we interested in terms of EU funding, and what do we want to do, and, you know, what can we offer? It kind of helps you clarify what it is you want to achieve through EU funding. So the profile asks you, and I know Christina showed it in action there, but it asks you the focus of your work. So what, you know, if you're a homelessness organization, obviously you're working with homeless people, and then what you were interested in EU funding wise. So maybe you're interested in research, and you're interested in education, and you're interested in advocacy or whatever. So you can click what you're interested in, and then it's searchable, obviously. It also asks you about your EU project experience. And as Christina said, don't worry if you don't have anything, it automatically inserts that all organizations will be supported by Access Europe. So even if you're new to EU funding, hopefully that shouldn't put off anybody who might be considering you as a partner. And importantly, it looks at what are your EU funding goals. It asks you, what do you want to achieve through EU funding? And this is really important, because a lot of the times people they're just thinking about a project. They're not thinking about the big picture of, well, what do they actually want to achieve? So it's really encouraged to look at it like that. And then also what strengths you can bring to a project. A lot of the time people, particularly community voluntary groups, kind of forget about that, you know, you have access to communities, you have expertise in a specific area, you know, you have strengths that you can offer in a project. So it's important to kind of showcase them as well. And in terms of that EU funding goals, I highlighted that because I wanted to come back to it. You know, one thing that we really recommend is breaking it down into your EU funding goals within 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So within 2 years, you might start small, maybe be a partner first, build your systems and kind of your capacity gradually. So that might be your first goal. Then maybe within 5 years, you're looking to scale up. You want to start leading projects. You want to develop capacity and really kind of strengthen and expand your EU network. And then within 10 years, you're looking at being able to run multiple projects and really pursuing those kind of higher budget and more ambitious projects, maybe partnering in a Horizon project or something like that. So these are, this is the kind of a typical EU funding pathway that you might look at. So it's a kind of a long-term investment in your organization. And when you're doing that, then we've got a couple of minutes left. When you're doing that, then it's also an opportunity to map what you need. So like, right, you've had an overview of all the programs. You've picked out which ones are interested to you. You've looked at what you want to achieve within your 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. You've set up your profile. But now you're recognizing like, right, we actually don't know anything about the systems that we need in place, or we need way more information about this program before we go any further. Or, we need a bit of grant writing training because we're not confident with the actual application form. That's when you kind of map, well, what do we need to actually action this little mini strategy that we have? And that's where you can reach out to Access Europe, because we provide the information, we do research on behalf of the sector. So we do all the research into all of the different funding opportunities that are out there every month for the sector, and we can condense them in a newsletter. So we can advise you on that. We do events and training like this one, so you might need to do a bit more training before you jump into this. As I said, this is part of a series, so we'll be following up with more training about designing your project and building partnerships, so that could be interesting. You might need to organize a meeting with us so that we can give you more tailored advice or support, and you might want to look at doing a little bit more network building first, either by creating your profile on the database, which is a little bit of network building, but also reaching out yourself. Maybe there's local universities or other local stakeholders that you could be working with that could help kind of gradually develop your capacity. And that's where, again, we're kind of coming on to what are the supports available. So as I said, we provide all of those supports, or we can put you in touch with the national contact point who can give you a lot more detailed information about whatever program it is you're interested in. But just to kind of remind you that we do those updates on EU funding programs and deadlines, free trainings and events like this one, one-to-one advice, signposting, and the networking there. And that's all of our details. You can visit our website, follow us on Twitter, please do, because it's always helpful. And then if you do need to reach out to us, just to reiterate again, any questions that you have that we didn't get round to answering here, by all means, send them to us at europe@wheel.ie. As I said, we might be a little bit inundated after this training, so bear with us. It might take us a few days to get back to everybody, but we will get back to everybody, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So that's it. Where are we now? We're bang on 12 o'clock. Thank you so much for, I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you so much for bearing with us. I know it was a huge amount of information. I hope the little breaks helped to kind of clear your mind in between.